Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Darkness. The Camera, from Mr. Midnight 6. My wife, my daughter, and I moved into a nice home an old couple was renting back in 2015. The elderly couple were very nice and asked for a reasonable amount for rent in a nice neighborhood, allowing us to walk in and look around. After seeing how beautiful it was, we accepted their offer. They informed us the house came equipped with a security system, just in case of emergency, and they will cover the fees. Once we moved in and settled down, we were delighted to be there. Months went by without any incident, besides a couple of false alarms from the security system. We loved it there. One night in particular, I could remember late at night when my daughter woke up crying and came running to our bed. She said she saw the shadow of someone outside. Right after she told us this, the security system went off. Getting up and checking my phone, there was an alert on a window sensor in my daughter's room. Running over and turning on the light, nothing was there. I checked the window and it was securely closed. I received a phone call from the security company to check on us. We told them we were fine, and they shut off the alarm. I calmed my daughter down and told her she can sleep with us that night, and she gladly did so. 2 days later, we went out for dinner. I heard my phone ringing, and upon checking, it was the security company again, telling me the living room motion sensor had triggered, and there might be someone in the house. After hearing that, I told them to dispatch the police, and I will check the interior cameras on my phone to see. Checking the camera, I saw something that sent a cold chill down my spine. I saw a dark shadow walking slowly behind the couch, and it disappeared out of the camera's view. Freaking out at this point, I calmly told my wife we have to go. Returning home, police surrounded the area and asked us for the keys to the home so they can check inside for intruders. After 30 minutes, they came back out telling us no one was inside and nothing was out of place. My wife was feeling uneasy and was unsure about staying in the house. I pulled her aside and told her what I saw on the camera. Giving me a funny look, she said she didn't believe me and thought an intruder somehow managed to break in without setting any window or door sensors off. I called the security company and scheduled an appointment to have everything checked, and as I suspected, everything was working properly. A couple more days would go by without anything unusual, until one night, my daughter started screaming for us. Jumping up, I grabbed my gun and ran to her room. When I got there, the doorknob was locked. She kept screaming, saying, "He's going to get me!" Panicking, I kicked the door in. When I turned on the lights, I saw my daughter crouched in the corner of her room with her covers and pillows on her. I checked around with my gun at the ready. No one was in there besides my daughter. Putting my gun away and picking my daughter up, who was sobbing uncontrollably, she said she saw her stuffed bear moving, which fully woke her up. Then she saw a shadow standing on the far back corner of the room, walking slowly towards her, which caused her to start screaming. Calming her down and walking her back to the master bedroom, my phone began to ring. Answering, a representative informed us a motion detector downstairs in the living room picked up activity and asked if any of us were down there. We ran in our room and locked the door, telling the lady that no, we were all up here, and demanded that she dispatch police immediately. Checking the camera on my phone, with all of us looking, we could see a silhouette of a man moving back and forth, then suddenly disappearing out of the camera's view. My wife and daughter are scared to death at this point. I told them I was going to go check it out. My wife refused to let me go out and check downstairs. I told her I'll be fine, while grabbing my gun. Suddenly, the door started shaking violently. Aiming my gun, I told my daughter and wife to cover their ears, and I fired 2 shots. The door stopped shaking. We heard police sirens outside, so I gave my gun to my wife and instructed her to immediately close the door behind me and lock it once I stepped out, so I could let the police in downstairs. When I stepped out, I looked around and ran downstairs to let the police in. They began searching around. They had heard the shots and feared the worst. I led them up to where my family was. After explaining multiple times what had happened and what we saw, the police didn't believe us, since we didn't have saved footage of what we saw. And since it would take weeks to go through getting court documents and paying a lot of fees so the security company could release the footage, we just decided to move out the next day, not wanting to stay in the home any longer. We packed up and explained to the elderly couple what had happened. They didn't seem surprised at all. I told them I will pay for any damages I caused the night before, but they didn't accept any money. We apologized to them many times. They understood and accepted the keys back from us. When the U-Haul truck was loaded, the old man told me, "This is the 3rd time this has happened to us this year. I wonder what is so bad about this house." After thanking him one last time and shaking his hand, I got in the truck and drove off, never looking back. The Bumpy Man. From an anonymous user from Michigan. So, I've always been open to paranormal things. I recall several things as a child, but the older I get, the less I see, as adulthood and responsibilities have overtaken my ability to see things that I once did. I had a son in January of 2011. By 2013, when he was almost 2 years old, we moved out of my mother's house and into our own apartment. It was kind of a rushed ordeal, as my mother and I butt heads a lot, and as soon as I had the money, I went to the first available opening. The apartment manager had actually asked me to hold on for an extra 2 weeks because, as she said, some girls were moving to Florida and left the place a mess and it needed cleaning up. She never asked for a credit check, any references, anything. It was just an, "Okay, I'll let you know as soon as the rental is up to par." I moved in probably a month after she said I could have the unit. Upon moving in, I had a strange but comforting feeling. I started out with nothing but a box of toys and a nice blow-up mattress for myself and my almost 2-year-old son to share. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bathroom, lots of closet space. Eventually, we made it a home. But one day, my son was in the spare bedroom, what was going to be his room, and had started laughing. A hearty baby laugh that takes work to muster from any baby, really. I walk in and he's staring at a corner and acts as though he doesn't even see me in there. Then, suddenly, he stops. Anyone with a child knows this is a little odd. The child will normally look to the source of entertainment for more, but my son just stopped and toddled towards me as if told to do so. It seemed odd, but I dismissed it. Fast forward a few months. We've got our own beds, although I let him sleep in mine, and I awake one night to him belly laughing once again, full-on giggles in the darkness. Nothing but the moonlight through the sheer curtains bouncing from my face onto his, since I'm the one facing the window, and he's looking over my shoulder into the darkness, a big smile spread over his face. And I say, "What's so funny, my honey?" And he says, "The man," as he's still gazing over my shoulder. But then his smile gets scared and serious, and he puts a tiny finger over his lips as though he's mimicking someone, and he says, "Shh, no mama, no man, go night-night." Needless to say, I did not go night-night that night. Weeks passed, and small incidents happened where he'd be laughing or talking about his friend. I started not worrying about it because, to me, it wasn't that big of a deal. He stopped being creepy at night. One day, though, he was in what was supposed to be his room, just cracking up, laughing once again. When he came into the living room, I asked him, "What's so funny in there, bud?" And he replied, "The man, he funny. He tell me jokes. He not a monster. He tell me jokes. He nice, mama." I was like, okay, he's got an imaginary friend. Wonderful. Whatever. This goes on another week or two, until one day he's in his room having a full conversation. I don't recall what. I just remember hearing him chatting in there as if having an actual conversation, and him repeating a word I knew he didn't know. Too big for an almost 2-year-old's vocabulary. He comes into the living room, and I ask again, "Who are you talking to in there?" He says, "The man, Mama." I knew I shouldn't ask, but I did, and I said, "What's the man look like?" And he replies, "Bumpy. He's Bumpy, Mom. Look like monster, but not monster, Mom. He nice. He tell me jokes. He nice." I'm sitting there like, okay, cool. This is totally an imaginary friend. All is fine. And that was that. A few days later, I wake up suddenly to a fight in the hallway. My next door neighbor had come home drunk and was banging on her apartment door like a complete psycho. I had grown up rather comfortable in a town where locking your doors was optional, so for once, I went to the door to lock it so this woman wouldn't accidentally open my door, and it was already locked. The door handle, the deadbolt, and the chain lock. I never locked the deadbolt, let alone the chain lock. I was confused, but wrote it off as being a tired mom. The next morning, bright and early, my son wakes me to, "Mama, the man saves us. He locked door from bad lady, Mama." Again, I write it off as he heard the commotion the night before and credited his imaginary friend for my actions. Later that day, I had just gotten a carload of groceries, and I took the first few bags in and up the stairs, and I got a movie in for my son to occupy him while I got the rest inside. I go out on maybe the 3rd or 4th trip, and a neighbor catches me. She's my age. I hadn't met her before, but she seems kind. She approached me and introduced herself, then asked, "Maybe this isn't appropriate, but how much did you pay for that apartment?" I didn't exactly know the rules to how the units were priced or what have you, so I just vaguely asked why, and she said, "Well, did they tell you what happened there?" And I was like, "No, she said she was waiting on some girls to move out who were going to Florida, but..." I trailed off. She says, "No, there was a dad and son who lived there. They both had that genetic disease where you get bumps or polyps all over your skin. The son killed himself in the spare bedroom by overdosing. Nobody knew for days. They had all sorts of cleaning crews in there. It's a shame, too, because he'd always tell my kid jokes and say, 'See, I tell jokes, I'm not a monster.' He was so sweet to my boys. He was so worried about scaring them. He'd always tell them jokes." Our Old Haunted House, from Kitty JJ. I grew up in the same house for years. I was 4 when we first moved in, and 21 when we left. So this is a few stories from my whole family that happened in that home. At first, I would share a small bedroom with my mom, and my dad would sleep in the living room. My aunt and uncle shared the master bedroom, and my brothers both share a room. My whole family would talk about odd things happening in the house. I think it started with my mom hearing footsteps in the living room. Our house was old, built in 1924. It would easily shake when someone would walk, so my mom would hear these steps in the middle of the night. She originally thought it was my dad, as these steps sounded heavy. Every time she checked, however, he would be sound asleep on his bed. She would also tell my dad how she would feel someone pulling her hair and feet at night. Although she was scared, she would not scream, because she didn't want to scare me. Another night, she was in the living room with my dad, watching TV, when she heard what sounded like porcelain hitting the back of the cabinet a few times, as if it were falling and finally hitting the carpet. She thought maybe it was one of the little porcelain dolls she had placed on top of it, and decided to check in the morning. When she checked the next morning, Nothing was there. One day, one of my aunts came to visit the aunt who lived in our home. They were sitting in the living room when they heard someone with heavy footsteps walk up to the front door. They also thought it was my dad and expected him to come walking in at any minute, but no one did. They went out to check, but no one was at the door. They didn't hear anyone walk away either, so they brushed it off. Another time, my aunt was home alone cooking in the kitchen when she saw a bright, almost shining, gangster-looking person walk from the living room into mine and my mom's bedroom. She chased him, screaming, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" To her surprise, when she went into the bedroom, no one was there. At some point, my dad got my brothers and I a basketball to play with. The first day we had it, we left it outside by my bedroom window. Late at night, my mom heard it bounce. It was in a rhythm. She thought it was us kids playing and was ready to yell at us, but when she looked out the window, no one was there. This happened 3 more times. My mom eventually got sick of it, thinking it was all in her head, and moved the ball to the opposite side of the house, next to my aunt's window. The next day, my aunt came to my mom and asked if we were playing outside her window last night. My mom told her no, and asked her why she was asking. Well, my aunt had heard the ball bouncing. My mom asked if it was in a rhythm, and my aunt said yes. My mom popped the ball with a knife and threw it in the trash after that. Now for my brother's stories. One day they were both sitting in their beds, watching TV, when my mom and I came into their room to bring them food. I don't remember this at all, but my mom said their bedroom doorknob had twisted and the door had opened by itself. My brothers thought she was the one who opened it, and she thought they were the ones who did it. They all agreed to disagree, denying what they saw. Late one night, my brothers had left their bedroom door open, so they had a full view of the bathroom and hallway. One of them woke up for some reason, and he looked at the hallway. That's when he saw a black figure crouched on the floor next to the bathroom door. He woke up my other brother, and they both stared at the figure for about a minute or so. The figure stood up and disappeared before their eyes. On another night, they were hanging out with their friends outside. I was with them, and I recall this all happening. They kept pointing at a figure in the backyard. My brother ran into the house and brought out a flashlight, but when he tried to shine it, it wouldn't work. I recall all of us debating on whether or not to go back there and see what it was, but we were all too scared. We called it a night and came inside. Out of curiosity, my brother turned the flashlight on, and it was working perfectly fine. We were shocked. I remember we took a trip out to Mexico, and we stayed at my grandma's house, my mom's mom, and I was about 8 years old, and I really wanted to see my grandma, my dad's mom, so I stayed up. For context, we all slept in the living room of the house. There were a few beds there, so my family of 5 slept there. The beds were pushed right up against the wall. You wouldn't be able to stick your hand in there, that's how tight up against the wall they were. I kept looking at the clock, waiting for daylight so we could walk to Grandma's house. It was about 5 a.m. I looked at my mom's head, and I saw a hand come out from where the bed and wall meet. A pitch black hand, at her head as if it was aiming to grab her hair. I vividly remember thinking how weird it was to see how black this hand was. You know when your eyes are adjusted to the night, and everything is somewhat a dark blue color. This hand was solid black, compared to the rest of the blue-hued room. The strangest part was, it turned to me, the palm facing me as if it saw me, and it quickly lowered between the bed and the wall. I didn't feel any sort of fear, just full-on confusion. How did it fit there? Why was it so black? Eventually my dad woke up, and we left to my grandma's. I didn't tell anyone. Now for the finale. We came back from our vacation. All the stories of our home were building up, and everyone was telling my dad what was going on. He denied it for a while, claiming that nothing had ever happened to him, so it's not true. Then it happened. My dad woke up to the heavy footsteps in the hallway, right next to where he slept. The next morning, he told my mom and agreed this was something paranormal. They went to the church down the street and asked the priest to bless our home. The priest came by that same night, blessed the home with no issue, and that was it. Just like that, everything was over. At some point, I told my mom about the hand in Mexico, and boy was she shocked. It's as if I confirmed it for her. To this day, she fears the spirit may still be following her around. She freaks out at any mention of a black figure. As for my old home, I later found out an old woman had fallen in the restroom and died, and a gang member had been shot and killed in the house. Those were probably the spirits my aunt and brothers saw. I just hope they both found peace. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you would like to have your story read in one of my videos, you can submit it to storiesofdarkness55@gmail.com. Pleasant dreams.